Hello and welcome to the Responsive Family Sleep Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Hawley, holistic sleep coach, lactation consultant, peaceful parenting educator, and mom. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by all the conflicting sleep info, frustrated with sleep information that just plain felt wrong, or searched desperately for a truly gentle and responsive sleep approach, then you are in the right place. In each episode, we'll be answering your most pressing baby and toddler sleep questions, busting those sleep myths, and helping you understand truly developmental, biologically normal baby and toddler sleep, plus encouraging you to trust your intuition along the way. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. This week, I wanted to talk about the false promises around sleep training. I feel like I've been having this conversation a lot, which often happens when I ad hoc decide on a podcast topic. And I just want to explore it some with you all because there is such pressure that sleep training is the answer to sleep challenges, right? And just because you don't want to sleep train, or you want to be responsive, or you believe in responsive care around sleep, doesn't make you immune from the pressure and the promises of sleep training, because we do live in a sleep training culture, right? Sleep training is a product of history and culture. And at this point, it's so dominant and so embedded in our culture that we, as parents, aren't always aware of the ways it shapes how we think about sleep. And there's so many directions we could go with that, right? But for today's episode, I really want to talk about this idea that sleep training is a guaranteed quick fix if only you could grit through it. If only you're strong enough to do it. If only you can, be consistent enough and be strong enough to handle just a little bit of crying, right? Then you have this quick fix. Now, anyone who's been listening to this podcast for a while, knows anything about my work, knows I'm not a sleep trainer, right? So this isn't how I practice. And yet, even in the world of my most aligned clients, right, this pressure is real. And it is something that we are constantly re-engaging with in ourselves, right? This pressure that sleep training is the answer. If only I would do it, it would take all this hard struggle away. And often something we are engaging with our partners if we're not on the same page about sleep, right? If they feel like if we'd sleep trained, we wouldn't be this tired. We wouldn't have a baby waking up this much. We wouldn't have a toddler with parent preference, like we wouldn't still be feeding, like whatever it is that is hard for you in sleep, we have this tendency to be like, if we had sleep trained, we wouldn't be experiencing this. Or next time we have a child, if we sleep train, we won't be experiencing this. And so all this to say is there's so much to say around sleep training research that we could do a whole series of episodes on it, particularly around its effectiveness, how we research it, like safety, all these things. And I promise that I will do episodes on those at some point. But for now, we're coming back to this idea of it being a guarantee. And when we think of sleep training as a guarantee, it's like this nagging weight that we're carrying, that if we made a different choice, we would definitely have a different outcome. And I think that's exhausting, to be really honest, because it promotes a lot of self-doubt and constant questioning and constant, like, is this bad enough for me to make that other decision, right? And to a certain extent, that's natural when things are really hard and it's taking time to find the right pieces to get everyone's sleep in a more sustainable place. It's also really natural if you're holding on to a very narrow view of what you want sleep to look like. And if it's not looking like that, then you're feeling kind of resentful, right? But I think it's really important that everyone wraps their brain around, comes to terms with, accepts the fact that sleep training is not, in fact, a guarantee. Meaning, it's not a matter of if we done cried out or controlled crying or sleep lady shuffle or what have you, our baby wouldn't be waking, they'd be able to fall asleep independently. We wouldn't have a toddler still waking up, 3-4+ times a night. But that's not what the research says, and that's not actually what the experience of many parents says. So I also want to acknowledge here, right, that there's a wide range of experience with sleep training. So some people do have the classic, minimal crying over a few days, and then their child really does sleep well for a long time. But that's not necessarily everyone's experience or even the most common experience. And so what a lot of people experience is sleep training might, huge might here, improve or change their baby's communication patterns, leading the parents to get more sleep in the short term. And then anytime that their pattern shift, so maybe a big developmental leap, maybe some teething, maybe they get sick, maybe you travel, and your patterns kind of are shaken up either on the parent side or the kiddo side. And then we have a little one who is waking more, right? Who reverts back to waking more. Or in actuality, they were waking the whole time because sleep training doesn't actually change waking, it changes communication. And so they go back to communicating their needs and waking you up again. And, research also shows that it isn't just a few nights of crying for many, many babies, that many babies are crying regularly for weeks. And, weeks of crying for it to maybe eventually stop or maybe not. And obviously, I don't see a lot of the people who find sleep training to be very successful and a good experience for them, because why would they come to me, right? That's not what I do. I tend to see the folks where it was a lot more crying than they were comfortable with, or it didn't work at all, right? Like it just plain old didn't work, or their baby clearly was showing signs of stress, not around sleep, right? Like overall, their baby was really stressed, and they saw it in their behavior at other times, not just their behavior around sleep. And so I'm detouring a bit here, right? But the idea here is that sleep training is not a guarantee that sleep is going to improve in the short term, meaning that for some kiddos, it will not make a difference in how they communicate around sleep and your sleep. For some kiddos, maybe after a lot of crying, it will for a period of time. And for some kiddos, of course, we'll have that sort of classic, what the sleep training folks sell us, what they tell us it's gonna be. But then we have to rethink, okay, even if it changes communication, because remember, it's not changing sleep, it's changing communication, meaning babies still wake the same amount. They still have the same needs. They're just not externally communicating those needs to you. So babies, it might change, right? Their sleep, or their communication rather, and it might not in the short term. Assuming it does, it might not last. And so when we're thinking about, sleep training is the answer next time, this time, later, if we'd done it, whatever that thought process is, kind of grappling with the fact that it could also not work. And then how are you going to have felt about something that didn't feel right in the first place, right? Or it could work, in quotes here, it could work, but maybe you're going to have to sleep train, 2, 3, 4 times over the natural period where wakings are really common, and re-engage with that sleep training. So it's like, it's not always a quick fix in that babies often cry longer than we expect. It's not always a quick fix in the fact that it's not going to work for all folks, but also it's not always a long-term fix. It's not like if we sleep train once, we're not going to have to keep re-grappling with sleep as it unfolds, because you are, in the vast majority of cases, going to need to re-engage with some sort of sleep training or sleep strategy, or step back up, and shift back to a more responsive strategy, right? There's all sorts of ways that sleep is going to unfold no matter how you support it. And I want to emphasize that as well, right? Like obviously, I think most of us come into the responsive world knowing that sleep is going to be an ongoing project, right? It's not a one and done sleep solution sort of situation. But in the sleep training world, I feel like that is a lot of the mentality, is like, I'm going to hire a sleep coach at 6 months, at 9 months, at a year. whatever. And we're going to spend a few weeks doing some strategies and then sleep's going to be fixed. And that's not true in responsive stuff. It's not true in sort of the middle of the road sleep training strategies. It's not necessarily true in, the more extinction cried out sleep training strategies. And so I think when we're thinking about sleep strategies and choosing a responsive approach and have that questioning like, oh, what if we sleep trained, right? To acknowledge that it's normal to be like, what if we did something different? Even if we don't really feel like that aligns with our values, but also to remember that it's not a promise. It's not a guarantee. It's not something that if you were to choose it would definitely get you the sleep that you want. And I do think it's important when we're thinking about sleep strategies to look back and think like, okay, if this doesn't work, how did I feel about the process of trying to change my baby's sleep or improve my baby's sleep or improve my sleep, right? Will I feel like I supported my baby? And okay, it didn't work and that sucks, right? But I feel good about the process. Or would you look back and be like, that was really horrible and didn't get us good sleep, I think that's a helpful perspective because it reminds us how much this is about relationship and the relationship of sleep maturing over time, the relationship of the way that we're supporting our kiddo, the way that we need to still make sure our needs matter, right? It's not about martyring yourself for your baby. But with such a strong narrative that sleep training is a guarantee to get you better sleep, it is a quick fix and it will solve all your sleep problems, I think we're regularly grappling with that conflict, right? But we're grappling with an idea, a concept that isn't based in the reality of sleep training. So I feel like this is a slightly ramblier episode than normal. I apologize. I'm getting over a cold, but this was really on my mind and I wanted to share it with you all. When you are feeling torn, when you are feeling pressure, when you are feeling like if only we had made different choices, or with our next kid, let's make different choices. Let's get out ahead of this. Or, just that little voice in your head saying, did we pick the right path? Did we create this hard journey? And would sleep training have fixed this journey? Would it have made it easier? I think coming back to the fact that we do have research showing that sleep training often involves more crying than we expect. It often doesn't last. It often needs to be repeated. And it does not work at all in any way, shape, or form for a decent percentage of littles. Anywhere from 25 to 50%, right? Depending on the study we are looking at. And so for a lot of parents that I work with, when you sort of face that reality that we've been sold that sleep training is this magic solution, and it's actually not, right? It's easy to let go of that fantasy that like, what if I just sleep trained and then they'd sleep, 11 hours through the night and I'd be so rested and it'd be so wonderful. I think that can be a helpful mindset check, right? That it's not actually what we think it is. And there's a whole range of experiences that we could have with sleep training, just like there's a whole range of experiences we could have with our outcomes with a responsive and attachment-based approach. And not to let that false promise of sleep training as this perfect solution add to your exhaustion, right? Add to your stress or add to kind of the weight you carry as a parent in this society. So I hope my musings give you some food for thought. I'd love to hear what you think and how you feel the pressure to sleep train when you don't want to sleep train, impacts your parenting and your experience with supporting your little sleep. Thank you for joining me today. I hope this episode left you feeling more informed, confident, and encouraged on your sleep journey. And just a reminder before you go that nothing in this episode is individualized to your specific sleep situation, nor is it to be taken as medical advice. Take what resonates, ignore what doesn't, and check with your healthcare provider about any medical concerns. Take a moment to subscribe to this podcast so that you'll never miss an episode, and take take a moment to rate, review, or share an episode you love on social media. All of that helps parents just like you find me, this podcast, and this gentle and responsive sleep information. I'll see you next time.